Did you all hear that there was an attempt to assassinate Bolivia's democratically elected president? Now, if that might be a surprise to you, if you didn't hear about it, that's not really that surprising, unfortunately, because it got almost zero coverage in the English language media. There is basically only one media report in English that was in Reuters. Here is this media report. Bolivian government says Haiti-linked group planned 2020 plot against President Arce. Now, that headline is extremely euphemistic. First of all, it's not just the Bolivian government saying it. The Bolivian government presented evidence proving it. Two, this so-called Haiti-linked group, also known as Colombian mercenaries backed by the U.S. government who assassinated Haiti's president, calling it Haiti-linked group is like calling the CIA U.S.-linked group. And then planned 2020 plot. Now, that is another incredible euphemism from Reuters. When they say planned 2020 plot, they mean plan to assassinate, to murder the democratically elected Bolivian president, Luis Arce. Now here we'll read the Bolivian we'll read the Western corporate media propaganda in Reuters before we go and look at what Bolivia actually said. So this is what Reuters reported. Members of a group involved in killing, that's a nice way of saying killing him, involved in killing. The U.S. police officer was involved in the officer-involved shooting of the gun that somehow, of the fatal metallic object that suddenly went off, and no one knows how it went off, and a projectile lodged itself in the back of a young black man who was fleeing. I mean, it's the same kind of propaganda. Members of a group who killed the Colombian paramilitaries, who killed Haiti's president, Jovenel Moise, had conspired to assassinate Bolivia's president in 2020, according to Bolivia's interior minister. Eduardo del Castillo, who is the Bolivian interior minister, said at a news conference that the government has emails, audio recordings, immigration data, and hotel stays that prove a failed plot against Arce, a socialist who swept to power last year. Note the propaganda in Reuters. He swept to power. No mention of the fact he was democratically elected. He didn't sweep to power. He won a free and fair democratic election after a U.S.-backed military coup. But no, he swept to power. So after a divisive period of right-wing interim government, another way of saying a brutally violent repressive period in which a U.S.-backed fascist coup regime massacred peaceful protesters, discriminated against the indigenous majority, and imprisoned their political rivals and exiled their political rivals. So anyway, here's a quote from the Bolivian Interior Minister. We are talking about the fact that days before the October elections in 2020, I was there and I can talk about my experience in a few minutes. Colombian paramilitaries who would later kill the president of Haiti and mercenary contractors were in Bolivia. Now, what they didn't mention here is mercenary contractors working with the United States. Conveniently, Reuters left that out. I mean, incredible. Reuters is such a propaganda mouthpiece. And that's not that surprising because Reuters actually has as my colleague Max Blumenthal showed at the Gray Zone, Reuters has a deal with the British Foreign Office spreading propaganda against Russia on behalf of the British Foreign Office. Reuters also, during the first Cold War in the 1960s, was directly funded by the British government to spread propaganda against the Soviet Union and against leftists in Latin America. So you can bet today that Reuters continues to have a cozy relationship with Western governments to spread propaganda, which is why they conveniently left out the role of U.S. mercenary contractors involved in a plot to murder the democratically elected president, Luis Arce, around the times of the October 2020 elections. Del Castillo made some of the data available to media. Of course, they say he made some of it. This is the evidence, not just the data. This is the evidence. And then the rest of it's just insane propaganda. Bolivia has been deeply polarized since 2019. Yeah, since a military coup backed by the U.S. The election was annulled by the Organization of American States, who said there was electoral fraud. Again, blatant propaganda, a total lie. Amid widespread protests, the military withdrew its support for the democratically elected President Morales. That's a fancy way of saying it was a military coup. Of course, they say the OAS supposedly annulled the results. That's actually a lie. That's not true. The OAS doesn't have the ability, the authority to do that. Bolivia is a democratic, sovereign country. What actually happened is the OAS lied and said there was fraud, which was blatantly proven false by numerous reports, including a report from the Massachusetts Institute for Technology, MIT, one of the leading elite universities in the United States, showing explicitly that it was a lie, that the OAS claimed that there was fraud and that it's not true, that the leftist Evo Morales won the election. So that was the propaganda in Reuters. Here is what Telesur said. Bolivia denounces an assassination attempt against President Luis Arce. So here is, if you want to actually know what's going on, you can read Telesur, which is why the U.S. has tried to destroy Telesur. So the plan was to be carried out before Luis Arce assumed power in November of 2020. The minister of the governor, that is Eduardo del Castillo, you could say he's the interior minister, denounced that over about a year ago that there was an attempt to assassinate the president, Luis Arce, right before he took power, in which there were people were implicated in killing the president of Haiti, Jovenel Moise, were involved. So, I mean, this part of the report is kind of echoing what we already know. It's talking about a report that further revealed the attempt to assassinate Luis Arce. And here is the minister of the governor, the interior minister, Eduardo del Castillo, denouncing that the so-called gobierno de facto, that is the de facto government, that is the coup regime, planned and failed in the execution of an attack, an attempt to take the life of President-elect Luis Arce. They contracted mercenaries that later assassinated the president of Haiti. So an important detail here that is not really emphasized, it's kind of confusing in the Reuters report, but is clearly said here. And you can see here, this is the press conference given by the Bolivian interior minister. He says explicitly that this was a coup, another coup attempt. This was an assassination attempt to murder President-elect Luis Arce. This is after it was known that he won the election. So these U.S.-backed Colombian paramilitaries, these mercenaries, also plan to murder the president-elect, democratically elected, of Bolivia. And here's some more details. The interior minister mentioned, the Bolivian interior minister mentioned a specific Colombian named Germán Alejandro Rivera Garcia, who was detained for the assassination of the president in Haiti. He entered Bolivia through Colombia, through a flight from Colombia to Bolivia's Viru Viru in October of 2020, a few days before the elections. That is, of course, not mentioned in the Reuters report, that the Bolivian government has evidence showing this Colombian mercenary involved in killing the Haitian president flying to Bolivia a few days before the election. They also have evidence showing that between the 16th and 19th of October, that there were other Colombian mercenaries that entered the country. They name here Arcangel, which is hilarious. His name is Archangel, Pretel Ortiz, and Antonio Entriago, both of them who flew from the United States to Bolivia. So we have Colombian murderers. Mercenary is a nice word for saying Colombian hitmen, assassins. One flew from Colombia, one flew from the United States. And the Bolivian interior minister has evidence showing that there's a link with a US-based, Miami-based contractor called the Counter-Terrorist Unit Security, with its headquarters in Miami. So go back. I want to go back really quickly. This is an incredible detail that shows how propaganda works. Remember how Reuters, they had a quote from the Bolivian president, but they put in right here. Here's the quote. They're quoting the Bolivian interior minister, and they have this quote from him, and it's a direct quote, but they conveniently here, they have an ellipsis, the three little dots aligning what he said in the middle. Why would they cut that out? Because they cut out the part where he admits that they have, where the Bolivian government says that they have evidence implicating a mercenary firm in the United States, in Miami. And the propagandists at Reuters cut out that part from their report. Incredible propaganda. Incredible propaganda. This is not journalism. These are mercenaries. Talking about mercenaries, these are info mercenaries. Reuters is a propaganda outlet which has a history of being funded by the British government. It is a tool, a mouthpiece of London, of the British regime, and its war crimes around the world, and its coup plots that it backs with the US rogue regime to overthrow independent governments around the world. And they conveniently, they edit quotes to leave out what Bolivian government's officials were saying. Mercenary contractors were in Bolivia. Yeah, mercenary contractors with their headquarters in Miami. Headquarters in Miami, Reuters. So let's go back here to Telesur, which is actual real news, not the Reuters propaganda fake news. Again, emphasizing this, that some of the people, some of the Colombian mercenaries involved in this attempt to assassinate the democratically elected president-elect of Bolivia were working with a US-based, Miami-based mercenary firm. And then they said that reports in the international press showed that this Colombian mercenary, Angel Pretel, that he was also the recruiter for the assassination of the president in Haiti. So, and there's another quote from the Bolivian interior minister. He stresses that the way to solve our conflicts is not with violence, and especially not bringing killers inside the country. So this is an important quote that, of course, you didn't see mentioned in Reuters. Especially not bringing killers inside the country. They were physically in the country, and the Bolivian government has evidence of this. And here's another report showing the press conference, and this is a reporter at Telesur showing the interior minister, the minister of the government, revealing that the mercenaries that assassinated the president of Haiti, they stayed in the hotel, which is called Presidente, like the President Hotel, next to the Plaza Murillo in downtown, and also the Marriott, where there were where there were meetings with high-level functionaries, high-level officials of the coup regime. So there are two important details to take from this that were not mentioned in the Reuters report. That these Colombian mercenaries linked to the Colombian government and linked to this firm based in Miami, that they were staying in elite fancy hotels in the capital, downtown La Paz of Bolivia, and that they had meetings with high-level officials from the US-backed coup regime. Incredible. Incredible. And then they have the dollars, showing the amount of money, the tens of thousands of dollars being paid to the mercenaries. So the Bolivian government has evidence of this. These are not empty accusations by the Bolivian government. They have evidence, and it won't be acknowledged in the English language press. Now, I often criticize the Spanish language press, which is often just as biased and ridiculous as the English language Western press, but even Colombian media outlets like Semana, they had reported on this. So the Spanish language press didn't entirely ignore it. Here, this is, if you want to say that Telesur is all just leftist Latin American propaganda, Here is a Colombian newspaper that is extremely anti-Venezuela, anti-Bolivia, anti-Cuba, anti-Nicaragua. It's called Semana, a mainstream Colombian newspaper. Here's the title. Mercenaries that killed the president of Haiti also wanted to kill the president of Bolivia. So this got attention across the Spanish language media, but of course, if there's an important story, you're probably not going to see it in the Western corporate media because if it's too important, then they're not going to cover it. That's exactly how Western corporate media operates. Manufacturing consent with lies and propaganda and fake news.